We must protect the position of the American dollar as a pillar of monetary stability around the world.
The US dollar, king of all currencies. The reign lasting over 100 years, more than the British pound and French franc, who once dominated as world reserves. Now we have a new emperor rising in the east, the potential new currency of the BRICS. Will ditching the dollar for the trade be the downfall of the mighty? Let's find out in this episode of the FinTank.
Hey everyone, welcome to the FinTank. In today's video, we'll discuss why is everyone talking about the downfall of the US dollar's dominance in the world and the BRICS countries' potential decision to ditch the US dollar as their primary currency for trade to create an alternative of their own.
For decades, world trade has been dominated by the dollar.
The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world.
The SWIFT system, that actually became weaponized by the U.S.
The Monetary Authority of Singapore and the People's Bank of China have renewed the bilateral currency swap arrangement.
Saudi Arabia is in discussions with China to price some of its oil sales in yuan.
But as ties with Washington continue to be strained, Beijing and Moscow are diversifying.
China and Russia had taken another step closer towards dumping the dollar and agreed to trade in their respective national currencies, the Russian ruble and the Chinese yuan.
We will explore the reasons behind this potential move and discuss the positive and negative consequences if this is supposed to happen. Firstly, who are BRICS countries? BRICS was originally developed in the context of foreign investment strategy. It's an acronym used for the powerful leading groups of the world's leading emerging market economies, namely Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These 5 countries make up approximately 42% of world's population and 23% of world's GDP. Why ditch the dollar? The BRICS countries have been researching on this idea to create a currency of their own for trade purposes for years now. But the conversation has gained momentum in recent years as the US has become more aggressive with their economic sanctions against other countries. One of the primary reasons behind the potential decision of ditching the dollar is to reduce the BRICS countries' dependency on the US dollar, which has been a world dominant reserve currency for over 100 years. This dependency means that the value of the BRICS countries' currency is often tied to the value of the US dollar. And this can be very problematic when the US dollar fluctuates. Additionally, the BRICS countries believe that creating their own currency will increase their economic sovereignty and reduce their vulnerability to external economic shocks. Now let's look into the assumption where BRICS countries actually go on to build their own currency and ditch the dollar. What are the positives and what are the negatives? First, let's look at the positives. As we have discussed earlier, one of the main positives remain the dependency of the BRICS countries over the dollar. By having a currency of their own would give them more control over their own economies and allow them to make economic decisions based on their own interests rather than interests of the US. Creating their own currency will also reduce the risk of external economic shocks. For example, if the US were to experience a recession, the value of the US dollar would decrease, which would negatively affect the value of the BRICS countries' currencies. However, if they have their own currency, they could take steps to mitigate the risk. Another positive is it could increase the BRICS countries' economic sovereignty. By creating their own currency, they would have more control over their own monetary policy, which would allow them to better manage their inflation, interest rates, and other economic factors. Now let's look at the negatives of ditching the dollar. One of the main negatives of creating their own currency is that it could lead to increased economic fragmentation. Currently, the US dollar is used as a common currency for international trade and finance, which makes it very easy for the countries to do trade with each other. The reason being, US dollar has established itself as the most reliable currency over the past 100 years, and it has never fluctuated or decreased in value for a very long period of time. If the BRICS countries were to create their own currency, it could make the international trade more complicated and expensive at the same time. The reason being, you never know what would happen with this currency. it has not proven over the years? And what if it goes down at one point and never recover? You could basically lose everything. So that's one of the biggest risks with the BRICS countries trying to create their own currency. Another negative is creating their own currency is a massive undertaking. It would require a significant investment in the infrastructure, including new payment system, currency exchange, and financial regulations. So, what's the conclusion here? BRICS countries have been discussing this idea of creating their own currency for years now. And the main motive has always been to reduce their dependency on the US dollar, to increase their economic sovereignty. While there are certainly positives to this idea, such as increased control over their own economies, there are also negatives such as increased economic fragmentation and the significant investments required to make this a reality. Also, I should mention that there are a lot of differences between these countries and the way they function. For example, China is a socialist country and India is a democratic country. So it will be hard for them to agree on certain decisions. It remains to be seen if BRICS countries decide to create their own currency. But it's a topic that will be closely watched in coming years. If you got to learn something new today, please like, share and subscribe our page. This is D signing off from the FinTech.